we want to equip and encourage the church to engage with the medium of video games wisely and well, right? Or wisely and responsibly. And so, and kind of what we're going to do is like, I don't think this is the first time we've ever tackled this particular topic. But it has been a few years. And I think it's something that, like, one, I think it's just helpful for me too, to sort of come back and revisit these things, because it's like,
Okay.
I just ate a bunch of peanut M&Ms. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh dude, that's a S tier candy. And if you don't agree with me, you are wrong. You're allowed to be wrong, but you are wrong objectively. But anyways, there's kind of like, I have a, so it kind of, there's something that I was thinking about, like, so last full episode, we talked about Caleb Hammer and how I like his content, but he's actually kind of mean. And I think that's kind of what appeals to me about him, is like, it kind of like, there's a little bit of that like pettiness that I almost wish I could indulge in, and that at times I do indulge in. And I think, like, it's one of those things where when you get online, you can't help but sort of be, I don't know, surrounded and sort of just like, almost like, it almost feels like at times you're drowning in, there's a lot of like negativity in online spaces. And, some, and again, it's just kind of like, but some of that is just, it is what it is. Like, it's kind of like people, it's kind of like, we were talking about it, and it's just like, sometimes a thing is really great and kind of good, and then people get involved, and it's like, oh, this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah.
And, but, and I guess it's like I said, this is primarily like, it's kind of like, I want to talk about this because I think it's a good reminder for myself, first and foremost, sort of as we engage with the culture, because like, that's what this is about. This is about engaging with video game and gaming enthusiasm culture in online spaces, and kind of asking the question is, how should Christians conduct themselves in these things?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, like, there's a lot of division in video games, in video game enthusiast spaces.
Yeah.
Like, in a lot of ways, the medium has primarily been shaped by leftist ideologies lately, that progressivism and leftist ideas have sort of like been running pretty much unopposed in those spaces, whether it's through the different sort of journalism endeavors, or if it's even like, just, I think as a general rule, a lot of video games feel, the term that gets bounced around is like, there's a lot of like woke ideology inserted into these things, and kind of like, there's a lot of, and there's been like the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff and all of that. And I think it's kind of like, it's one of those things. One of the most recent examples is sort of like, there was a recent sort of dust up, and it actually sort of, it showed up in our Discord server, but as well. But it's like, and we've kind of had some light conversations with friends behind the scenes a little bit about some of this stuff. But like, there was a little bit of a dust up on Twitter, and about there's a game, I think it's called a Knight's Path.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were doing the social media stuff, and they're like, check out our new game and blah, 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 blah. And somebody kind of asked the questions like, hey, this is really cool. Will there be gay romances? And actually, I think this is important because like, there's a couple things here. Is like, the account that asked this question has like 2 followers at the time or something like that.
Okay.
It did not seem like but anyways, and we'll get there. I'll come back to that, because like, I think there's an angle to this that needs to be examined. So And the devs basically responded, or whoever's running that social media platform said, probably be good to just, I'm not looking it up. That's like, I don't care. Basically said, because it's like, they basically said like, we really care. What we care about is making a good game and solid gameplay, and we don't care about your agenda. And that kind of, caused a little bit of a dust up, and it ended up resulting with, last time I checked, I think it was like over 100,000 pre-orders or wish lists on Steam page.
Okay.
And like I said, it did kind of, there was some conversation in our Discord server about this. And it kind of like, in contrast to like, Fable was brought up, the Fable reboot was brought up as a point of contrast. High Guard, I think, kind of got tossed in the mix. There's another game.
Okay.
Geez. So many chords. I'm just yanking stuff all around. There's another game that actually sort of, what is that?
Is it the one with the bowl cut?
The bowl cut androgynous person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a boy or a girl. I'm not sure what's going on there. And the sort of the I think somebody described the other character that it engages with as an emo Tom Bombadil.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I respect that. But like this stuff kind of comes up, and none of this stuff exists in a void, right?
Sure.
And so I think there's some like groundwork that we need to be like, just sort of looking at the inciting incident for me, sort of looking at this and kind of asking questions about it and wrestling with this. It's like, there's not really two wolves inside of me, but I'm coming at this from a couple of different angles. I wanted to say that, but there aren't two wolves in me. There's one where it's like, listen, I don't think the Knight's Path devs tweet was that incendiary. Like, it was like, basically like, it's one of those things where it probably could have been stated differently to be a little less whatever. But also, like, I think because, like, obviously they've been called bigots and fascists and, of course, homophobes and all the other stuff. And, for some people that actually, they're like, yes, like, give me, take my money. Like, they're like, I will buy your game now, just to kind of like stick my thumb in a leftist's, eyeball, collectively speaking. But I don't know, like, but it just kind of got me thinking about how we as Christians should engage with it, or how even like I should engage with this. And again, like, none of this exists in a vacuum. So, the tweet was actually, it was kind of refreshing, and there was like, there was some other stuff. There was a tweet, they showed off like some concept art for the female character, and she was just very, an attractive looking woman. And it was just like a headshot kind of thing. And so, and of course, like like this stuff just always brings out the best in people. And by the best, I mean the exact opposite, because we can't have adult conversations about things, and we have to sort of just run down all sorts of weird rabbit holes, and just, it's almost like a contest sometimes, I think, to show off like, hey, I'm a bigger idiot than you are. And it's like, well, okay. But what I was saying is, like, going back to the thing is, like, it was kind of refreshing to see somebody kind of unapologetically say like, yeah, we're just trying to make a good game. Like I said, I think there's a lot of unknowns about this game. Like, I've got to just sort of like, I've seen a little bit. We don't know anything about these people. As far as I can tell, there's no real pedigree involved. Like, it's just a bit of a passion project. And so, like, it's like, the jury's out on this, but I think like that kind of like just, and again, it's all the conversation around all of this and just the demeanor and sort of like just the general online talk around all of this. Like, cause of course
Okay.
it's like, and again, like some of the touch points for surrounding this conversation where people like sort of like there was stuff coming out about Fable and
Hmm.
people are like, kind of just, and I think it's like people, it's the whole actively wanting these games to fail and some of the
Okay.
vitriol that sort of shows up. And it's like, on one hand, it's like, hey, if you don't like something, you don't like something. And if you have a like kind of a bad feeling about like a concept trailer or whatever, like that's fine too.
Sure.
But I do think there's something in there to like to wade in and wrestle with just as far as like general conduct online. And like how
Hmm.
should Christians, if Christians should be involved in this stuff at all, like how should we sort of conduct ourselves in these conversations? And so it's like I kind of pitched this to you. It was a little bit of a like a last minute pivot kind of thing. Well, we didn't really have anything on the agenda, but I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting. Um, and it might get us in trouble. And that's kind of fun. It might make some people mad. And so okay. And it might not. I don't know.
Sure.
But I guess, like I said, the question here is like sort of looking at all this stuff. I think it begs some other questions, but it's like, how should we as Christians kind of engage with
Yeah.
this stuff?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. With gaming culture in general, but especially when it's used, I think in these different ways to kind of score points with
yeah,
either side, either team. So whether it's you automatically love something because it's bucking the trend of current social mores, put it that way,
mm-hmm,
or whether you automatically hate something because you see it kind of going along those same lines.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something that, and we're not saying don't have opinions, but the question is, how do we engage as Christians in a way that's wise, and how do we refrain from sinning with our digital tongues, I would
Yeah,
say also, because I think we have a tendency to do that. And I say we as like the collective we of kind of getting caught up in things. And I think it's similar actually to one of the things that we talked about when we first started the podcast, the backlog breakdown, is that we don't want to get caught up in the hype cycles of games and just pick up new games because, hey, it's the cool new shiny thing. And so we
mm-hmm.
should plunk down, however much it is, $60, $50, when we started the podcast, whatever. For the newest, the latest, and the greatest, when we actually have a bunch of games already to play. I think similarly to getting caught up in the hype cycle, we can similarly get caught up in just kind of rooting for our own team, ideological teams. And so that can cause us to rashly, I think, say things and jump to conclusions. And so I think that's what we wanted to talk about today is just being wise in the way that we engage with these things. Because on the one hand, I don't think there's anything wrong with attempting to read between the lines of certain things. So if I'm supposed to hate Fable because of the way that a male character walks in a teaser, um, okay. It's not wrong to notice, that's not very realistic to the way that men walk, and it's kind of feminizing this character. It's not wrong to notice that. In fact, I think that would be astute to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't know that that automatically means the game is gonna be a dumpster fire, or that we should necessarily root for the game to fail at this point.
It actually, like stuff like that actually communicates very, very little about the actual substance and content of the game.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, it tells you that in that clip, the main character has like has an effeminate gait.
Mhm.
That's what it tells you. It tells you nothing else. Everything else that you're drawing from that is inference,
Mhm.
and speculation. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the point, is that like I think wisdom actually requires us to maybe step back, ask a lot more questions. Like we've talked about it before, but um Alex from the long defunct podcast, The Rugged Marriage, at one point in time had like a basic rule about engaging with social media. And it was like, I'm pretty sure it's like he waited 3 days, at least
Mhm.
3 days.
Mhm.
And part of that was to like give himself time to process. So to step back from the emotional response, like
Mhm.
logically think through things, process these things, right? And then also in that time, a lot of times, like sometimes more information comes out, right?
Right.
It's like that. There's that proverb. It's like the one who speaks first, he seems like he's in the right. And I'm paraphrasing this, but then
Mhm.
it's like, but then the other party speaks up and suddenly more comes out. And
Mhm.
it's like, and I think that whether unintentionally, I'm going to just sort of like, I think that sometimes like we can fall into like sort of almost like gossip and slander in
Mhm.
some of these things, because we sort of we've fallen prey to these anti-hype cycles, right? Where it's
Mm.
like so much of the reality that we live in is like socio-politically charged. Like there's an agenda behind everything
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and there's this like scoring points on either side of the ideological line is actually the goal, right? And to a
Mhm.
certain extent, like it makes a little bit of sense. Like, and again, like it started out like the games media, the games industry, like for is like they're very unapologetic about their leftist leaning, right? And that's fine. Like
Sure.
have your idea, like have your ideals, have your whatever, but they're all in a lot of ways hostile to centrist or even right leaning sort of people on the ideological and socio-political spectrum, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the recent example was, with the death of Charlie Kirk, there was that dev on Ghost of Yote who was over on Blue Sky,
Right.
like I don't know what they call their tweets over on Blue Sky, who was posting really like nasty things. Like people were celebrating the brutal assassination of a man in front of his child,
Yeah.
right? And like that's gross, that's repugnant, right? And that's kind of like the climate that we're in. And so there's a part where it's like I want to be careful in saying like, hey, I think we actually need to make principled stands. Like
Mhm.
you and I have
Yeah.
talked about this. Like
Yeah.
there are certain types of games, certain very particular games that were like, we don't think we can play this because it violates our conscience because of X, Y, and
Mhm.
Z.
Yep.
Like games that sort of, but yeah. And so obviously we want people to be conscientious. We want them to be principled. We want them to make principled decisions. But this doesn't, a lot of this, the rhetoric surrounding some of this stuff doesn't feel principled. It feels reactionary. It feels like sort of it's like buying into again, the game, the socio-political games. And
Mhm.
I think especially like one of the things I'm concerned about, and some people will be like, why are you, okay, and this is like, some people like, maybe I'm just sort of like kind of cutting heads. Some people are like, why are you picking on the church? Like, why are you picking on your fellow Christians? The thing is, I love my brothers and sisters more than I love the world. And so I'm going to be a little firmer with them because I expect more out of them. And because I
Mm.
think like the expectations, like, it's like you judge more hard, like we talk about video games, and sometimes like the video games we love the most are sometimes the video games we go after the hardest. Like
Sure.
now, sometimes the video games we hate the most definitely feel like our wrath, but it's kind of like, it's like I'm speaking up, and maybe I'm picking on, our brothers and sisters here to a certain extent, but it's because I care more about them. Like
Yeah.
they're my brother, they're my sister. And, I, and so it's like, I'm going to issue words of caution or warning or whatever. And like, so, and I don't want it to seem like I'm picking on anybody here. This is more of just like sort of, again, we've seen broader trends. And this is sometimes even sort of like, I think this is a useful check against my own proclivities, where it's
Okay.
like, cause I love, I mean, I lurk in social media spaces because I can't trust myself to be civil at
Mm.
times.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that, um, you know, so, and again, it's like, and a lot of this makes sense, like, because like you want to make a principled stand. And like, frankly,
Mhm.
it's like, sometimes you just want to get like that hit back. Like sometimes you just want the other side to take the L, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, it just feels like we have been like, getting served a bunch of L's at times. And I think like all these are reasonable and rational. And it's like, and it's not completely outside the pale of like, I'm not saying that like all of these things are like wicked or bomb. Like, I'm just saying like, it makes sense. But I also think there's a little bit more to like dig in and wrestle with here,
Mhm.
and questions to be asked. And so,
Yeah.
cause I think sometimes what happens is that you're responding to evil, or you're responding to injustice, or you're responding to wickedness, or you're responding to wrong ideas or bad ideas, but you overcorrect.
Yeah.
And, there's a phrase in sort of, again, the socio-political circles. It's like no enemies to the right, no enemies to the left. Right. And so it means like everybody who's sort of like in this camp, that's our ally, and we can lock arms with them. And I'm going to sort of say, I don't think that's actually the case. I think there are a lot of people who sort of are on the more conservative leaning side of things that actually the church should probably actively avoid. Whether these people are grifters, or whether they're just sort of like, they're secular humanists with conservative tendencies, who, like, I'll give an example. Like there's a guy, and he's kind of Twitter infamous. He goes by the handle Grums, Grummz, right?
Okay.
And there are things that Grums has said that I actually think are pretty agreeable. Like, and he's kind of, he kind of, his shtick is he goes after the leftist and the liberal sort of ideologues in the video game industry. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. He also objectifies women to a ridiculous degree.
Okay.
Like, sort of relishes, he's one of these dudes who his big gripe is like video game girls aren't hot. And then like he celebrates something like Stellar Blade, where, and like Eve's skin suit in Stellar Blade. And it's like, and it's kind of like, we don't co-sign with that. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying here? It's like
Yeah.
we can agree with some of this stuff over here, but like we can't walk in lockstep with somebody who's going to objectify women, who's going to sort of promote lust,
Yeah.
and and it's like we don't co-sign on that. We don't co-sign, like, with, and so it's kind of like, I think for Christians who are seeking to be salt and light, and like, and engage wisely, it's like there's a lot of nuance, and some, like, there's minefields to be avoided.
Mhm.
And there's also like, we have to be, I think, maybe a little more, I don't know, just like there's a lot more involved. And so it's like, again, this is like kind of like the conversation that I think it's a conversation worth having. So,
Yeah.
um I don't have, I don't know that I have a ton of, like, I have two ideas that I kind of want to, like, three possibly.
Okay.
Um, and like, I have three actually passages in scripture that I kind of want to bring up.
Okay.
So the two are sort of, you know, admonishments that I
Mhm.
would say. Let me just kind of pull this up here. So I want to bring up two passages in scripture here. Ephesians 4:29. And I don't think anybody's going to, like, these aren't going to be like, these are fairly commonly cited. So, but Ephesians
Sure.
4:29 says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, that it may give grace to those who hear." Okay. Building up as the occasion, that it may give grace for those who hear. And then Philippians 4:8, which is one that's like, I think it's been a primary verse for this podcast in a lot of ways. Like, in one of the things, like, "But finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things." right? And then, and so it's like, and these are two, I think, of the bigger ones, but like Hebrews also, it says like build each, like with your speech, build each other up. Like, I think there is a general pattern in scripture where we are told to be builders,
Mhm.
or sort of encourage it. We are like, our speech is to be gracious. Um,
Mhm.
and, it's like, if possible, we're to be peacemakers, and I think that, so that means that we have to actively sort of avoid being unnecessarily incendiary. Like, and maybe at times we have to soften our language. Now, it doesn't mean that we compromise. It doesn't mean that we call something that we don't call something that is evil good,
Mhm.
but it does mean that maybe like, hey, if there's a nicer, a kinder, gentler way for us to say something, maybe we ought to consider that. I think one of the things, like going back to Alex's sort of recommendations, is like sometimes the consideration is like, do I need to say anything at all? And it's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
sometimes I think the better part of, discretion is the better part of valor, and so it's like
Mhm.
sometimes it's just smarter to just not wade in and kind of like, and part of this is that, like, I think that I kind of hold to this position that we're liturgical creatures. And so it's not just like
Okay.
the, it's not just the content that we read, right? It's also the things that we say and the things that we do also shape us. Like scripture tells us
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
Jesus says, like, it's not what you're taking in that defiles you. It's not what you're putting in your mouth. It's what's coming out of your mouth that's actually
Right.
defiling you. And so it's like, and again, this sort of the liturgical creature model, like, is one where it's like, we are shaped just as much by what we do and what we say as the content that like we take in. And
Mhm.
so this is something of an issue where it's like, hey, like, are we being shaped by this, by giving vent to maybe our frustration and being ungenerous or unkind? And again, like, it's not to say don't be principled. It's not to say like, hey, we don't co-sign with evil. And that's explicitly like, like but at the same time, like, again, so there's like some, like, these are some things where I'm like, these are some ideas I think in
Mhm.
shaping, how we interact with this stuff. I think, and the last thing I'm going to sort of throw up here, the other thing is that we talked about, like, so much of this is about scoring points ideologically, right?
Right.
Like on both sides, like, and it's like owning the libs, owning the conservatives, right? And obviously, you and I we're Christian men, we're reformed dudes, right?
Mhm.
We are conservative leaning at the very least, we lean
Sure.
conservatively. Like, I think I I don't think either one of us, like, I'm probably closer to being centrist than you are, and
Mhm.
I don't even think I'm that centrist.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm probably more centrist than some people, but like, um, but like, we lean right sociopolitically. We
Mhm.
lean right ideologically. We're conservatives. And so there's like, that's kind of like putting our cards on the table here. And so, um, yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, and again, like, I don't think the answer is like just fleeing these spaces and completely, like, I
Right.
mean,
Right.
completely abdicating those and turning those over. But I do think that it means that, like, hey, we just have to be a little more savvy, and
Yes.
we have to be wiser. We have to be a little more discerning. And so,
Mhm.
like, I've kind of been like dumping all this stuff here,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, you go.
As we mentioned earlier, I mean, I do think that there is part of it is just being carried away by the discourse, like you would kind of in a hype cycle. Is that and one thing that even as we were talking about this, the ideas for this podcast, one thing you have to be mindful of, especially on the internet, is overreaction for the sake of engagement. And because people tend to engage with content that they dislike even more than content that they actually like, which is and that is exploited. That human
Well, and it's
flaw to
monetized on
enjoy your
Twitter.
sin. Right. Right. And so there is even an inherent um advantage for someone to stir things up on Twitter for the sake of engagement and interaction. And we ought to be careful, again, as Christians, careful how we use our tongue, how we use our digital tongues, and that we don't get caught up in the moment. Because, like you said, Nate, there's nothing wrong with even noticing certain things that are going on, even disliking things. So even going back to that example of, say, Fable, I don't like the fact that you would have male characters with feminine traits. I don't like that, like an
Mhm.
ideology that androgenizes people, and then oh no, but not every man has, is super manly. No, that's true, but I think it would be ridiculous not to notice the androgenization of our culture. I think there's this egalitarian bent of our current culture that frankly says straight up there's no difference between men and women.
Mhm.
And so to a certain degree, like, is this animation for this way this man walks trying to teach you that? I think it's good to be wary of those things, but we also ought to be measured in the way that we react to it. um
Mhm.
th- th- I, I can have my suspicions that I don't like what this game is teaching, seems to teach from this trailer, but I also don't know anything else about the game, which is what you said earlier. And so I think reacting wisely would not try and dunk on Fable, even if you get pictures of the dev team. If I remember correctly, I've seen this for Fable, and you say, "Hey, look at these guys! Like, this seems, I'm connecting the dots here. The dev team don't seem they seem like they are intentionally trying to push these things on me." And so for these reasons, like, I don't think I'm going to get this game. I think there's a way to get caught up in, say, the meme culture, which
Mhm.
I like a good meme, okay? I like a good dunk, but when that is every reaction, I don't think it's wise. I think for a joke, for a laugh, okay, but when that becomes the not the normal discourse is just mockery, I don't think that's wise.
Well,
Yep.
and I think that's the other thing is like, and that in a lot of ways can be weaponized against us. Like if we fall into like those sort of the reactionary sort of like ideological like pillars where it's like, taking snipes, like if I'm being honest, and I know some people would maybe disagree with some of this, but it's like, frankly, sometimes like when in online spaces, I see the left and the right, and it's like their playbooks are almost identical.
Mhm.
It's just a palette swap. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's actually a bit of a problem for me. Um, because like, as a Christian, I know that I'm called to do more, to be more than
Mhm.
just, like, and and so and I think, like I said, it's one of those things where it's like, and again, I don't know anything about Knight's Path, but it's like, it is really weird that this game kind of comes out of nowhere. This tweet, and again, like the sort of the person asking about that, like even that, like looking at that, it's like that seems like almost like a weird burner account, like not a bot,
Mhm.
but like this is not like a long standing. This account had like two tweets before this, and then the
Okay.
person says like, "Hey, is there going to be gay romance options?" And it's like, and all of a sudden, like they do this thing where it's like, we don't care about your agenda. We just care about good gameplay. And you're dumping that comment into an environment that's already like primed for this kind of stuff. And now it
Sure.
has like 100,000 wish lists on Steam.
Mhm.
Whereas like, and I'm saying like, I don't want to be too suspicious, but like to me, that's weird. Like,
Hmm.
it's like nobody knows anything about you guys. Like,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like, and then it's like this tweet. And again, I'm not trying to read too much into anything. I'm just telling, like, this is where like my sort of like, I'm like, okay, like this is sort of like it's not like an incendiary tweet. It's kind of like whatever. It's fairly tame, you know, but it's
Hmm.
like, and then all of a sudden it's like, you poke around a little bit and it's like, okay, this is weird. Like, and
Sure.
again, it's
Sure.
like I and so I think like the other side is like, sometimes like these things can be used against us. So like, and again, it's like we're in a way like we're humans, and so we're fallible, and we're like, it's all of those things, right? And we're gonna
Hmm.
sort of like fall into these cycles. But I do think that some of Christian wisdom and discernment actually requires us to be maybe even a little more reserved in some of these things. And again, like,
Yeah.
hey, if the game looks cool, you're sort of like you're in for it. Like, hey, that's cool. That's fine. Like,
For
it's
sure.
not saying, I'm not saying don't have opinions, but it's like, I think it's
Right.
more of like when this stuff, like, and I'm just going to say like my natural reaction, I saw that tweet and I was like, okay, like whatever, this is a nothing burger. I saw like the overreaction on Twitter and I was kind of like just disgusted with like, cause like I see that reaction and it's like, and again, it's kind of like, how can you not know this is the reaction that you're going to get? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how can you not know that this is what's going to happen online? And
Okay.
then my natural sort of like disposition is like, again, it's to just distrust that. Like, it's
Sure.
like,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like when people do this, like so much of like engagement online, again, is like performative, where
Hmm.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's about scoring points or it's about this and that. And it's like, and again, that can be weaponized, especially on Twitter, where engagement is actually monetized. Um, so it was like, but again, it's like I've had to sort of like step back from that because it's like I don't know anything about this game. Like I've seen some
Hmm.
screenshots, I've seen some like concept art, and I'm like, hey, like I think like the thing is like, so even sort of like my own sort of, again, sort of my predilections or my predispositions, right? It's like I've had to like sort of push against that and just be like, hey, like some of it is we need to let these games speak for themselves, right? And we don't know what we don't know. And I think
Hmm.
that it's just kind of one of those things where that is tough, right? I think
Sure.
especially in
Sure.
this day and age, like that's very difficult. Just because it's again, it's sort of like the waters that we've been swimming in have been so charged and so tense that it's kind of it's yeah, it's tough to
Yeah.
navigate it wisely and well. But I do think it does require us to just sort of maybe be a little more reserved and wait until we have more information. You
Hmm.
know, and again, I would also say I think it's different. Like, so like you're in a group with friends and like, we say dumb things to our friends and with our friends all the time. Like,
Hmm.
I shared a clip of of an exchange from a movie that it's
Hmm.
like I was like, and it's like that is not something that I would that is not something that I would share with people in a broader context. Like not everything is
Sure.
for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think like
Yeah.
that's sometimes those conversations that you have with friends that might get like a little spicier or a little more jokey or whatever. Like those aren't always, you shouldn't always carry those same conversations into public squares.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's like kind of knowing your audience, or maybe not even knowing your audience, but like knowing your context actually matters.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think that that's part of it. But I do think, like I said, and it's tough. Like it's tough because like I think the reality is like, you know, one of these things is that when you make especially when your principles are grounded in sort of like biblical truth. So when you make a stand, when you take a stand for, you know, the only proper sort of, you know, sexual kind of thing is marriage between a man and a woman,
Mhm.
you know, and that's like the only like right expression of human sexuality.
Mhm.
Um, that flies in the face of a lot of the ideologies. And so it's like, if you say that in video games, and that's a fairly like innocuous, like banal statement in a lot of ways. Right. But
Mhm.
like, you're going to be called a homophobe. You're going to be called a bigot. You're going to be called a fascist. And that kind of like, there's a way in which that can sting, but it's also like, you know, and so it kind of like, it's one of those things where I think there's difficulty in just even navigating those things. It's like, and I think we need to be careful, I think, to not add offense. Like, you know, there's this,
Mhm.
you know, like the fact is the truth is offensive enough to the unbelieving world, right? Whether they're conservative or liberal, like whether they lean liberal or conservative, like truth, like the truth of the gospel, the biblical truth is offensive to the non-believer,
Mhm.
you know? And I think part of this is sort of making sure that we aren't adding offense, you
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, that's kind of like part of what I just want to encourage people to, it's like, we just need to think about this. Like, we need to
Right.
maybe slow down. We need to maybe not, and I'm not saying don't engage in culture war stuff. Like, I think we need to
Mhm.
make stands, but I think we need to be wise, and we need to be a
Yep.
little more savvy. And I think sometimes that means possibly toning some of our language down, or some of our
Yeah.
rhetoric, or maybe not jumping on certain sort of like dog piles. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there, and especially in
Mhm.
gaming, like, and it's kind of like the weird thing is like there are broader applications here, right? Um, but I think especially when we're engaging with gaming culture, yeah, it's just you know, I think I was listening to something recently, and it just like I was reminded of the fact that like someday we're going to give an account to the Lord
Yeah. Yeah.
for
For every careless word.
every every careless word. And I
Yep.
think that means every careless tweet, every mean tweet, every, like,
Mhm.
all of that stuff. It's like you're going to give an account. Now, good thing is the good thing here is that the I'm coughing right into the mic. I'm clearing my throat. But the good thing is that the grace of God is sufficient,
Yeah.
and that Christ's life, his death, and his resurrection, they wash you white as snow,
Mhm.
but you will still give an account.
Yeah.
And I say a lot of stupid things. Like, I say a lot of stupid things, and sometimes I say stupid things on this podcast. So I don't need to add any other, like, and I think it's like sometimes we don't think about these truths,
Yeah.
right? Because like the reality is like it's really easy to slip into, like, you know, I was meditating on this morning as I was driving into work, right? Like, so right now our family's verse is John 129b. It says, behold the Lamb of God who has come to take away the sin of the world. And John the
Mm.
Baptist says this, right? And really, that is so much of like the Christian, the you want to know the key to the Christian living? Behold the Lamb of God who has come to take away the sin. Like, train your eyes, look upon him,
Mhm.
like, behold him, right? And in a way, be held by him, you know. Um, but like the thing is, like, you know, and again, sort of referencing Jamie K. Smith's or James K. A. Smith, but Jamie Smith's book, you know, You Are What You Love, and
Mhm.
he's the liturgical creature guy, right? It's like, you know, we are made to live with the grain of creation, and ultimately we know that that's the better and actually the easier way of life is living with the grain of creation, God's natural ordering, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that the reality that we all live in as people like the local, the much more like contextual stuff. And I think that includes online spaces to a certain degree. Like we are equally shaped by that. And Psalm 1:1 tells us, and it says, blessed is the man who does not walk in the way of, or walk in the way of sinners, or walk in the way of the wicked, stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers.
Mm-hmm.
But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. And that might be a little bit of a paraphrase, but there's something in there where there's actually a progression, right? So he starts out walking, then standing, and then ultimately sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, that talks about like the progression of sinfulness. It starts out like you're kind of moving, and you might be moving against the grain, but at some point in time, like you stop moving against the grain. Like you stand in that, and you maybe rest in that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately you're sitting in it. You're like, you're entrenched in it. And it's not to say that you can't come out of that. Like, cause ultimately like Jesus is the only man who has ever perfectly walked that out. He is the man who has, walked with the wicked, but not been shaped by them. He has stood with the sinner. He has sat with the scoffers, and he, amongst the scoffers, and he's been merciful. But his delight was on the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditated day and night. And so it's like, and in that we can take ownership of that. But again, it's kind of going like, there's this progression. And I think the natural progression is, again, like, because we're liturgical creatures, your local context, your local experience at times feels much more pressing than it actually is. And it can shape you much more. And it's just easier to see that than maybe like the greater grain of creation. So there's a lot of stuff there where it's like, I'm like kind of like throwing word vomit out.
Yeah. It's good, man. Especially just because we can get so caught up, but we need to, I say we need to recognize, as if like, oh no, everyone needs, fix yourself. But even in my own heart, that like, hey, at the end of the day, like, we want to do the Lord's work in the Lord's way. We want to, even when we speak, we want to speak the way that a Christian would speak, right? One who has their eyes fixed on Jesus, as opposed to just the way that the world was, even if they're on our ideological team to some respect. So like, going back to even the Knight's Path thing, thankfully, like that, like you were talking about, it was a fairly tame tweet. And even the image that they had for, one of their characters is just this attractive woman, and thankfully it was not as, I don't know, exploitative, whatever you want to say, objectifying and it was, excuse me, it was not objectifying. Okay. But you compare it to other things. I mean, I think of this, I brought this up when we were kicking around ideas for this episode too, of I think parallel to this in kind of the movie and TV discourse space. There are people that I would align with more that are going against the grain of the current culture, but they go so far as to extol, I want more nudity in my movies or something along those lines. Not only do I want to look at beautiful women, I want to look at them without clothes on. And as a Christian, we can't sanction those things. Like, we're not on the same team there.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is like, too, is like, we should rejoice at beauty and truth.
Yes.
Like a beautiful thing is a beautiful thing. And I think like one of the things is like, now, and this is what I'm going to say, is it's kind of like, we have to be very careful when it comes, especially as men, like, because the reality is like, we call women the fairer sex for a lot of reasons, just like, because they're pretty as a general rule. Like, girls are pretty, they're softer, they smell nicer most of the time. But and again, sort of going back to that model, is that we know it's one woman, one man, and that's that. And so it does mean that, like, we have to be very careful. And because of the way the world is and because of the way of our hearts are, like there are predispositions to lust and all sorts of other things. And so like even there, it's like, you know, it's oh well, man, that's a good scratch. You're just wow. I need a haircut desperately.
That one's a good scratcher.
But like we should rejoice in beauty. And I think like in a way, like you and I could look at a beautiful woman and be like, that's a beautiful woman, praise God.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to be careful because that's also not your wife. And there's in a certain way that beauty is not meant for you, like, or me. Yeah. And so I think like even there, like there are, I don't want to say temptations but it's like you have to be careful there, especially because of the fall and our sinful hearts and everything else. But we should rejoice in beauty. I also think that there are a lot of times where, there is like sort of like even again, there's sort of a kind of on the other side of these things where there is kind of there's just a reject, like ideologically, there's a rejection of all truth and any sort of standards
right.
And so, it's kind of just like, it's messy and it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
So we do need to, like, on one hand, we should rejoice in sort of beautiful things. We should rejoice in true things, because all truth is God's truth, and all beauty belongs to Him. That's the hands that comes from the hands of the great artist, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think like so. Yeah, even there, it comes with some warnings and some caveats,
right?
Where it's like, hey, like ultimately, like we have to be even careful in some of these things.
Yeah, yeah. In what we mentioned earlier, even it's not, again, far be it for me to say that like noticing and picking up on certain things and that games or stories exemplify as good and true that maybe are not because of the ideological bent of the person who created it, the team who created it, things like that. Noticing those things is a good thing. It's wise. You can even notice something like that from a trailer, so I'm not putting that down. And even I would say, just because I didn't mention this earlier, even warning other people about those things. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay.
Nothing wrong with
so
that.
Please don't hear me saying like, oh, you should always give everything the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying that either. But I do think there's a step too far where we just kind of join in with the meme culture and the idea of you're just attempting to score points and you're just mocking things unduly. And so it is, well, we've said, how do you engage wisely and well? I do think it's a wisdom issue. And one of the last things I wanted to bring up is just the idea of Christian liberty and sin. So there is a line where there are things that we as Christians have the liberty that says in Scripture that all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. Right? So there are things that are morally neutral, that are not sin, that we can engage with, and that falls under Christian liberty. And for some people have stronger consciences than other people. And so there are areas in which I would decide not to play a certain video game for certain reasons, whether that's, hey, these devs made this other game that I really hate, so I'm just not interested. I'm not going to play their game, and I'm not going to give them money. Okay, that's fine. And I think there's Christian liberty in some of those things. Whereas,
or even like these days, like the game has explicitly anti-Christian themes, and like the creators have expressed like their like open hatred of Christianity.
Yeah.
or whatever like that. Yeah. You are by no means like, I don't support that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but also, yeah, there's a lot of things like if it's not explicitly sinful, like again, your mileage may vary. Like, and it's like you have to sort of you have to wrestle. You have to like your own conscience. You have to answer for your own conscience,
Yeah.
just like and so you have to answer for your decisions there. And not all content is suitable for all people.
Right. Right.
Um, that's and frankly, there's some content that's not suitable for anyone. Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
so yeah, the Christian liberty thing is like, it is important there to like, you may have a stronger or weaker conscience. And like, I think like, be careful in assuming that you're the, like, I think this is something that like, I try to make the assumption sometimes that I am maybe not always the stronger brother.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
sometimes I do have the weaker conscience or
Hmm.
the weaker resolve or whatever. So yeah, but we need to be careful that we don't unnecessarily bind other people's consciences and on
Yeah.
sort of subjective things. We have to be careful there. Like
Hmm.
that's actually, if you but also that we don't present temptations to brothers and sisters that they don't need to, you know,
Sure.
like there are some roads where it's like you don't want to be the reason a brother or sister stumbles,
Hmm.
um, either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
And I
some,
think actually there's a lot more to talk about there and diving into specific games that I think we'll have to table for another episode. Because yeah, anyways, there are things that come
yeah.
to mind there that I don't necessarily want to tackle, but I think that's a good kind of um, blanket statement there. The last thing that I want to say, and I can't remember if we started this episode off saying it, is as we've already kind of made clear, I guess I suppose I haven't said it explicitly, but I do think that online interactions, they do, like you talked about, they do truly affect us. And so we need to be careful that when we type something into and talk to people through the internet, that we do need to treat it similarly to the way that we talk to people in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you can't use slang, not that you can't do things like that. But what I'm saying is that we don't want to sin with the speech that we have online. And so I think it's actually really powerful just to name things like gossip and slander. And that is probably, actually, we probably should have pulled out those words early on in the episode. If we didn't, I just don't remember if we did. Sorry.
I think I
Um,
did say that I did say that like sometimes if we're not careful, we can actually venture into those
yeah.
realms with
And
things.
I think jumping on it was powerful for me as we talked about this to name those sins and think about how that applies to these contexts of watching a trailer for a video game is just being careful in our speech that, hey, there might be some things I don't like about this trailer, but be careful that you're not gossiping. Be careful that you're not slandering. You can, and again, not saying there's anything wrong with noticing things about and warning other people. Those are not wrong. But I would say you should be diligent to try not to sin in gossip and in slander. And yeah, I just think that's a powerful way to look at it, that like, oh yeah, no, this isn't just a gray area. Like there are actual true sins that God speaks about a lot,
Mm-hmm.
that we ought to be careful with when we talk about these things. Um, and look, guys, I enjoy talking about video games. Obviously, got a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always talk about the new and shiny. And I'm sure over the course of 204 episodes, I've said things that I will regret if I were to go back and listen to it now. And I haven't always been careful with my speech.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying this to say that, oh, do what I do. what I'm saying, but I do want to try and be better, and I do want to try and engage with the medium, like this episode says, wisely and well. And hopefully this conversation helps you to think about the way that you're engaging with both video games as a medium, but also just this general discourse about video games if you're involved in that, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are in some way. And so we would
Mhm.
just caution against sinful speech and in recognizing that our allegiance is not to ideology, it is to Christ. And so
Yeah.
let's seek to engage the medium well, to find to use video games as a method of recreation, sometimes rest of and truly enjoy these things and not allow it, not twist that gift that I think God has given us into an allowance for sin.
Yeah. I think sort of framing it as sort of a practice of wisdom is really probably it's one of those things like, and just even when we've talked about it before, like the way that we play games is different.
Mhm.
Like we come at it with a lot more intention, with like, and it's not to say like we're overly, you need to scrutinize all sorts of things, but like I think part of it's like you don't want to be a mere consumer.
Yeah.
You want to be engaging with the content, again, sort of on a deeper, richer level. And so but I also think that means like sort of the surrounding culture, because like that's part of it, is like the conversations around these games and everything else. And like we want to make sure that when we are speaking into these, um into the different arenas, so that when we're having conversations about games, that these words are useful, that these words are building up, giving grace to other people.
Mhm.
And I think that like, and again, that doesn't mean like, listen, like, sort of coming full circle. It's like, I opened up talking about Caleb Hammer and how like, I kind of like him because he's a little mean, and it like, that
Mhm.
appeals to me. I also think there's a kindness in there. Like, and it, so like, like, here's the other thing is like, I think sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell a person the truth. In fact,
Yeah.
not, no, there's obviously ways to be unkind and tell the truth as well. But
Yes.
I think is that, and so we want to make sure and that's part of it, is like, we want to make sure that what we're telling people like is true.
Mhm.
And so again, it's sort of like, hey, have your opinion, have your positions, and that's fine. And be willing to talk about those and discuss those, but also understand that like you actually have a responsibility to be honest.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way that we can talk about these games, like, and again, sort of some of the dialogue surrounding just like, even like, like one of the things, like, I'll give you an example where a lot of people were sort of like, and this is sort of like a really kind of tangible, but there was a lot of outrage about some of the character, like the going back to Fable, the
Okay.
original character that they showed off, and it was this girl. She was a little homely, but she wasn't like hideous,
Okay.
she wasn't a model. She was just like a kind of, she was a little goofy looking, maybe even, right?
Okay.
This female character. And people were losing their minds and being like, oh, like this is proof, the woke agenda of playground games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you
Sure.
know. Um, and then it comes out like, well, she's just that there's actually a character creator. Like
Okay.
she's not the main character. It's like, she could be, like, if that's what you want to make within the character creation process.
Mhm.
But it's like, so there, it's like, people are sort of like decrying this based on a character model, but like playground games, it's like, that's actually, they're like, actually like they're breaking ties with sort of, because Fable, like, it gives you the character and that's it. Like, it's like,
Okay.
you're this, and you can accessorize and stuff a little bit, but it's like, they're saying like, no, there's a character creator. You can make your character, and we don't know what all of that entails. But it's
Mhm.
like, And so even there, like, you know what I'm saying? That's pretty like light. That's pretty like that's
Sure.
in some ways insubstantial. But it's like all these people who are getting all worked up about it, they were lying about the game. They weren't being honest, you know? And I think like it wasn't intentional. Like, and it might even like, you know, and it's like, hey, I think it's fair to say like, hey, I have concerns about X, Y, and Z. You know, it's
Mhm.
like, again, sort of ideologies of these studios, like the
Yeah.
different things they say. But there is a part where it's like, we need to make sure that we're speaking truth. And
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
can't do that if you don't have all the information. You can't do that. It's like, and again, it's not to say don't have opinions or whatever. Like we're not saying that.
Mhm.
But it's just like saying like, I think we're urging a little more discernment, a little more discretion, and a little more caution.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, we're just, we want to, you know, yeah. So yeah, I don't have anything, you know, it's like we just need to be careful there. We need to be
Yeah.
careful with our words. So
Yeah.
yeah, every careless word. And,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And that includes online discourse. And
Yeah.
that's something that we need to wrestle with. I mean, God has put us on this earth at this time when the internet is a major part of our lives. And I
Yeah.
can say our because you're only listening to this because you know us through the internet. But you know, for the most part. So this is a battle that he's given you to fight and to figure out and to strategize. And so hopefully this has been an encouragement to do just that, to make sure that you are submitted to Christ even in the way that you interact online and with video
You put
games.
this in the show notes, and I want to talk about this because it's probably one of my favorite, you know, it's one of my favorite quotes.
Okay.
Is that it's like, and I've told this to you before, and but is something, you know, Proverbs has a lot to say about fools and engaging with
Hmm.
fools, right? You know, one of my favorites is actually like a fool's mouth invites a beating, and a fool's back is, you know, made for the
Yeah.
rod.
Made for the rod. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I like those ones. I like those ones.
Hmm.
I don't like when they apply to me, but I like those ones. But my dad growing up sort of had this thing. He said, arguing with a fool is like wrestling with a pig.
Hmm.
He's like, you have to get down to its level. You get filthy, and the pig just loves it. And I think like that's like some of it is like we need to make sure that we're not getting in the slop and mixing it up with pigs,
Hmm.
because all that does is drags us down. You know, I'm not trying to be unkind. And again, I'm not saying like we need to avoid all these conversations or any of that stuff. I'm not saying
Right.
any of that. Like,
Right.
I think we just need to, we need to be better about not climbing into the pig pen
Hmm.
and wrestling with
Hmm.
swine.
Yeah.
Cause again, all that happens is we get dirty and they just love it.
Yeah.
Like,
And they get Twitter engagement or whatever, you know.
yeah. So yeah, all that being said, yeah, it's like I said, I just like, and part of this is like, this is not me or you sort of looking out at the crowd and being like, oh, you dummies need to get it. Like, this is sort of coming back at us and saying like, we need to do a better job of this as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like, so,
Yeah.
all right. Well, that was, I don't know if that was fun. It was definitely more fun than the Roblox conversation. Like,
Oh yeah, I guess we have kind of had a negative bent with the past couple of episodes.
yeah.
But I think it's kind of a you know, whip yourself into shape. And I don't know, at least with this one it's kind of like a remember who you are kind of,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
it is sort of a call to like going back to that Philippians 4:8. It's like, you know, what we're trying to do is stir ourselves up, stir each other up, stir our audience up to sort of look towards excellence. Look
Mhm.
towards, you know, and again, I think that Philippians 4:8 I just think is such a banger of a verse. I'm gonna read it again, and it's just like, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Like, yeah. Like, so like, let's orient ourselves towards excellence,
Yeah.
towards truth and beauty and justice. Things that are really praiseworthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Love it.